Coffee Talk, everyone. And we have a very special guest with us today. Deputy Chief of Police for Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, Kendale Adams, is joining us from his mobile command post in his field operations out on the streets of Indianapolis. Thank you for taking some time to join us today, Deputy Chief Adams.
Jason, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. As you've alluded to, I am in, things are so bad here in Indianapolis. They had to give us a mobile office. And so I'm out runs today with some of the officers. And actually, we're talking about body cams and the implementation and having some really good discussions.
Well, and before we get started, I always like to start off with, this is a perfect segue here. You're out on the streets of Indianapolis. You're actually doing some proactive police work, it looks like, and that tells me that that maybe this question will play in. How do you take your coffee, Kendale?
Well, Jason, to be honest with you, I don't drink much coffee. If I do, it's got a lot of sugar in it, and it's called hot chocolate.
Okay.
I never drank a lot of coffee. So yeah.
Chief, have you ever worked midnight shift?
I did for a period of time. So drank a lot of pop during those times and ate a lot of donuts.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll let you off the hook on that, since it doesn't look like you have coffee with you today. You left that in the office? You left your cup?
I left that in the office. Yeah.
Okay.
Sitting on the pot.
Okay. Now, Indianapolis, a fairly large police department, one of America's larger cities. About how many sworn is Indianapolis?
We're just shy of 1,750 cops.
Okay. A large organization, and certainly in the heartlands of the U.S. All roads, or the crossroads of America, they say, is Indianapolis, and the Metropolitan Police Department there, addressing and really bridging that gap with your community. We know that you are a customer of BodyWorn by Utility. Can you talk to me maybe just a little bit about, Chief, about how that body camera solution has maybe helped to bridge that gap in your community that you serve?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Jason, and I think you set the tone, right? We're a city of almost just shy of 1 million people here in the city of Indianapolis, almost 400 square miles, 1,750-ish police officers, and another 200 civilians. So yeah, I mean, we're major events like the NCAA, hosted the Super Bowl, we're hosting the All-Star break in 2022. So a number of events, right? And as we looked across the landscape at best practices for law enforcement agencies, obviously the conversation of transparency and legitimacy have creeped up in our community as well. And one of those efforts that really was born by the community and then supported by our political leaders was the implementation of body cameras. And when we first started our program, we sat down with a number of community members, both from the Black and Brown community as well as Caucasian community. And we sat down with officers to get their perspective, because it's important when we talk about legitimacy. We're not only talking about legitimacy of the community, but we're talking about legitimacy of the officers. And so we had a broad range of perspectives when we instituted our program to include our policy.
Chief, to unpack that a little bit more, I know body cameras coming to the city of Indianapolis took a lot of community involvement. Mm-hmm. And can you talk about how that evolved a bit into the policy that you operate under today? Because we really are talking about policy-based recording. And I think there's no greater example that I've seen across the country of how Indianapolis involved that community in that whole process.
Yeah, so when we first instituted our program, we have 6 districts, and we went to all 6 districts with the technology, with the solution, right? And we let the community play with it. We talked about we started out with an SOP, right? Because we knew starting out, we would get feedback from our community that would help develop our eventual policy. So after those conversations that we had on the districts, one was to set the expectation, right? That cameras were there to help improve legitimacy and transparency, but they weren't the panacea. They weren't going to be one solution that was going to fix all. So then we got into we got the cameras deployed, got folks used to seeing officers with them. But the next important part was this kind of third bucket where we sat down with community members to include the American Civil Liberties Union. We sat down with the Indianapolis Urban League. We sat down with groups from east to west to north to south, along with a small group of officers to really start to give them an opportunity to provide feedback into our policy. And what we found during those conversations is that they provided some very insightful feedback, right? We write our policies based on what we think our cops need to see and need to know and what we expect them to do. But when you're sharing that with a community member that says, hey, instead of giving officers the ability or giving discretion to whether the officers turn off the camera, why don't you use a little bit different language? And so we were able to do that. A lot of the tweaks that they gave us were just really not big deal, but it really gave the community a sense that they owned this part of the process, which the policy.
So I think part of that policy, it has to play into the technology, at least for our customers. And Indianapolis was one of the first agencies across the country to deploy one feature that's unique to BodyWorn by Utility, which is CAD activation. Not just the integration of the body camera into a CAD system for tagging purposes and such, but actually the activation of the camera in the field when an officer answers a call for service. Can you talk about maybe the impact that had on your agency, that one automation piece for officers' ability to just go out and do their job?
Yeah, huge benefit for an agency our size. We wanted to lessen the burden of technology on our officers. Here in Indianapolis, we had just instituted a new CAD. We had a new RMS, a new reporting system. So we had all these different systems, and then you add in body cameras. And so the chief at the time wanted to ensure that we took every excuse out of the officer's hands of not activating that camera. We had a very smaller city that had cameras, in a critical incident, the camera failed to activate, and the officer, it was a manual activation. And so, and that was a big part of why we waited. That technology, had been emerging for the last couple of years and really had gotten better when we instituted within IMPD. But the feedback, as a matter of fact, I was just talking to an officer at roll call today, and one of his likes of the body cams that we selected was the fact that he doesn't have to worry about it. He goes on a run, it automatically activates. He can turn it off using his Bluetooth. But as he said, as an officer, I've got a lot of things going through my mind. What kind of run is this? Watching traffic. The last thing I want to have to do is worry about turning on my body cam. And because of that, what you call automatic activation, we call triggers. Because of that trigger, that's one less thing he has to worry about, which makes him, in his own words, more safe.
So unpacking that a little bit more, I know you're a hands-on chief. You're out in the field today, right?
Yeah.
And I think the whole piece of reviewing body camera video, what we like to refer to as audits, and in your hands-on approach to that audit trail, and some of the things that have benefited your agency from the ability to instantaneously have that audit and what you have learned maybe, or how your agency is better for that.
Yeah, I think that's the next iteration for body cams, right? I mean, I think a lot of agencies have gotten them, right, or are in the process of getting them. There's more resources available for agencies. So I think the implementation of body cams is pretty well accepted across law enforcement. But I think the next iteration is, okay, what are you doing with those body cams, right? I mean, obviously you're catching an unbiased account of what occurred, but at the same time, how are you using those cameras to make your police department better, make our officers safer, make them whole? And so really jumps off into this conversation of auditing and how, what are body worn camera units looking at? Are they looking at just depictions that paint the department in a good light? Sure. I mean, that should be a part of any program. But are you also looking at those videos to improve officer safety or ensure compliance, for example, with your body worn camera policy, to improve training, right? And so that's when this whole concept of auditing really starts to make it to the surface and really make a difference. And for us, we hired at the onset, we hired 3 redactors. We thought that public records requests would be a lot higher than what they are. So what we found is most of the insurance companies are requesting body cam footage. But what we found is we could use those redactors in their downtime to now do some auditing, looking at just simple videos. Again, some good videos that we provide to social media, and then other videos that we're able to provide to our training academy to say, hey, this officer entered this building by himself, right? And our training instructs us to wait for a second officer or have a plan. So, using it for that function, I think, is the next iteration of what agencies will face with body cams.
So you've highlighted and underscored a couple of things I wanted to circle back on. Efficiency, I think, is what you're talking about. Maybe Indianapolis is a more efficient agency because of this solution, but also, and probably most importantly, officer safety.
Yep.
Identifying some things that, hey, maybe we should change up, some training-based things.
Yep.
The officer safety piece, we always like to think of it that the technology piece of the officer down feature, right? An officer goes down, our body camera alerts, gives a GPS coordinate, sends the cavalry, and we have some saves in the field because of that feature. But I had never really looked at the audit piece being that big of an officer safety. Do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, you brought it up, and I think we have found, even in the short time that we've done the audits, there are many things that are discovered, right, that seem small at the surface, but if not addressed, can really become a significant issue. And for us, the example I have is we, within our policy, it states that officers must inform citizens that the recording is occurring. With new technology, obviously, there's going to be a gap there. I mean, officers are getting used to it, community's getting used to it. But what we found is that over 15% of our officers were not making that notification to the community. And most people would say, well, it's new technology, right? But if it's in your policy, and our policies are public, right? And our local paper pulls that policy and they say, well, it says right here that you will do that, and we don't find out until it hits the paper, then I think we're always, we're playing catch up. So by having those audits, we're able to send out reminders to our officers to say, hey, make sure you're notifying folks that you're recording. In addition, we've also discovered, we have a lot of officers that are doing a lot of other things, right? When they're driving on high critical calls, we found out a number of officers were looking at their computer or trying to write down something. And so we were able to address that in training with our officers, say, hey, make sure you're paying attention, right, on these high critical runs. So those are just a couple. And again, we didn't use it as discipline. It wasn't a situation where we're trying to go after officers. It really was just an opportunity to, again, as you kind of highlighted or alluded to, address that officer safety piece.
The efficiency part as well. I know a Metropolitan Police Department, you guys are fully engaged and immersed with county government as well. It includes the county prosecutor's office of Marion County. And how, can you give me a little bit of insight into how that solution has improved operations between prosecution and the prosecutor's office of getting video there efficiently, and that whole interaction, how that's improved things in the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department?
Yeah, you spoke to it earlier, but when we sat down and were implementing our program, one of the stakeholders we had at the table was the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. And they were important not only from an implementation standpoint, but from our policy standpoint as well. They have been a partner since the inception. And so by having the Avail Web and working with those prosecutors to process, as you can imagine, we have hundreds and thousands of videos that we're producing a year now. And so having that ability to share that video with a prosecutor really helps.
I think you're hitting all those points, Chief, that you can't do this by yourself. You have to have the stakeholder involvement, and certainly that always is a prosecutor's office. You're producing digital evidence and managing that solution with the prosecutor's office, and then that information goes over to a prosecutor's office in a web link, right? I mean, you're not hand delivering anything anymore these days.
Just get ready to say that's exactly right. So, prior we'd have to, walk the case over. The detective would have to walk the case over. Now with the video recording, we can just share it via Avail Web, and we can share it in groups. We can share it individually. We can lock down we can lock down certain videos to just them. So it really has improved that efficiency. We've got it down to pretty much a science now that they email our BodyWorn camera unit, we send the video over, and really that's the gist of it. And part of that is because we work with them on the front end to find a workflow that would work for them. And then on the back end, we found that it was much more efficient to just do the Avail Web share than any other process that may be out there.
Yeah, so you underscored a point there when it comes to earlier redaction as well, and your people, and then of course the prosecutor's office has to have that piece as well. And I know you're very familiar with our solution being a cloud-based system, and the instantaneous not only availability of the video but also the redaction piece being able to be done in the cloud and then sent back down for purposes of distribution once it's redacted. Has that piece improved efficiency in your own agency when it comes to producing digital evidence?
Yeah, I mean, having that solution to be, because there are a lot of redaction softwares out there, but having that solution already built into our Avail Web solution just makes it much more efficient. We don't have to come out of Avail Web, export it to something else, then import it back into Avail Web. We can do all that within the Avail Web solution, which makes it much more efficient. Really, when I say efficient, I'm saying makes it much more timely for our redaction specialist. You mentioned having that in the cloud, certainly makes it more timely, right? We're not waiting. I always liken it to that spinning circle that you get on the computer monitor. You're just waiting and wait. We don't have that because it's in the cloud. It's right there. Our redactors go get it as soon as it's offloaded from the rocket, and they're able to go in and do the redactions right there and then send the link to the prosecutor. I mean, even on an hour-long video, I was in the redactionist office the other day. They were able to do that in 15, 20 minutes because of the efficiency built into AvailWeb and having that information in the cloud. It's just been tremendous on our end.
Chief, I got one final question here for you. The automation of the system, as you well know, has multiple layers of safety nets to make sure that you have that video as an administrator, right? God forbid an officer-involved shooting, and I know that Indianapolis has had some of those with our solution. Any use of force. Can you speak to the confidence that the system gives to you as an administrator to make sure that you have that video when the public expects you to have that video, because they've paid for a system where they believe that you're going to have video when you're supposed to have it? Can you speak to that confidence level with those triggers?
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but I mean, I can tell you, since we had the solution, we've had at least 4 officer-involved shootings, and every time when I get the page that we've been involved in an officer-involved shooting, the first thing I typically do is pop open my laptop, log on to AvailWeb, and I'm usually watching the video so that I can inform the chief of police, what we're working with, what it looks like. And so in all 4 of those, I've been able to log in right away and see the video. So to your point, I think it not only has been reliable, but it's been robust enough and efficient enough that we can do that almost in real time. And, we've provided, we take those videos for us in Indianapolis, we take those videos and create these critical incident videos. And that process has been, the ability to export that video evidence has been huge, right? There's no issues with that. And so being able to put that into a video. So all of those things really helped us, really tell the story much more broader. And I think it's helped alleviated some of the stressors that communities sometimes feel when there's this thought that there's something nefarious that may have occurred. Having that video evidence to provide to the community or provide to the media has been tremendous. And I believe that it's probably helped us avoid some controversial times in these 4 shootings. 2 of them I think were controversial, but because we were able to provide that video almost in real time, it really helped alleviate the pressure from the community.
Chief, we know that our officers are out there doing very hard work in difficult situations, and we like to show that. Do you have any examples of Indianapolis Metropolitan police officers just doing their job and doing the right thing that you need them to do?
Yeah, I mean, we have countless examples of that, where an officer's playing basketball with a kid or changing a flat tire. But I think one, I just approved this yesterday. It was a person shot and run. And for the last couple years, we've been really hitting heavy our community that, officers really are out there trying to save lives. They're not waiting on medical attention. So in this video, we had an officer who rolls up on a person shot. He pulls out his tourniquet and applies the tourniquet to this person who had been shot in the leg. It actually had a major artery. And, that was one perspective, but I think to hear him talk to this victim, talk them through, hey, you're going to be okay, we got you. And other officers come and showing the compassion for what was really a chaotic scene. I mean, you had people yelling at him. You had, obviously distraught community members that were looking at their loved one who was unconscious. And to see that officer go to work, I mean, this officer is not a EMS technician, right? I mean, but to see this officer go to work, one, affirms our training, but 2, affirms to the community that we do care, that we don't just sit around and wait and don't render aid. And so, again, it wasn't the officer that was involved in the shooting, but it just showed that even though in this chaotic scene, the officer was able to revert to his training and potentially save this young man's life by using this tourniquet, which the community has provided. So it really just came full circle of the tremendous work that officers do, the tremendous pressure they're under, but the compassion that they have for our community members.
Documentation of officers doing what we ask them to do and doing it very efficiently and very fearlessly in today's environment. A great story. Thank you for sharing that with us, Chief.
Absolutely.
Chief, I know that you are aware that our automation, our policy-based recording, has been endorsed by the NAACP, National Board of Directors. And they've given us that endorsement based on the automation removing any implicit bias or human error to activate the camera. It comes on automatically. Has that played a role in your community? Has that talking point come up? As I know that as a former chief of police in Indiana, the NAACP is a very respected state level and city level grassroots organization that works closely with the police department there in Indianapolis Metro.
Yeah, it certainly came up in our stakeholder meetings, particularly around our policy. And I can remember a specific discussion I was having with the Indianapolis Urban League about that implicit bias piece and when to turn it on. And when I laid that policy in front of them and showed them that, it's automatic, right? It comes on if the officer gets a run. So there really is no question of the officer not doing it, right? The technology does it. It blew them away, right? And we got a strong, and matter of fact, in later discussions that we had with a bigger group, the Indianapolis Urban League came out very supportive of not only the policy, but the technology, and said that other agencies within Indiana, and specifically Indianapolis, Marion County, should endorse that kind of workflow.
Never asking an officer to do something that technology can do for them.
That's exactly right.
Thank you, Chief.